I'm not sure how many people will show up for this first office hour, but good to kick it off and have a friendly face on the other side. What is that image behind you, by the way?
That is the castle in Czech Republic where I got married.
Oh, excellent. And this was a destination wedding, or you are a Czech
No,
national?
now my wife is a dual citizen. She was born in Czech and family, and we have property there. We go back every year. If I just planned the trip for this year, I'll be over there for a few months again.
Oh, great.
So,
Well, I have my snow photo behind me because we had snow yesterday. So, but of
yeah,
course,
we
it's
did
all
too.
melted now.
Yeah, I'm in Eastern PA right now, but yeah, we had the same thing.
hmm So at least the kids got to see some snow,
Yeah,
and they had a New York actually had a snow day where everyone was working remote or not working,
right.
studying remote, and of
Yeah.
course something fell over and like half of the schools couldn't log in or something, and IBM is to blame for their failed single sign-on, authorization IDP provider or something like that.
Oh, sure, of
I can
course.
consult with them to help them fix that problem.
Yeah, I'm sure you could.
Information security is concerned about availability, integrity, and confidentiality. A lot of people don't
Confidentiality, that's
remember
right.
the availability part, but we know, or at least plan to think about the non-functional requirement of having highly available systems.
Right, right.
But I do know that they use some type of IBM SSO for the Department of Education, which they lit up, a tenant account in Azure over COVID, and they added 1.1 million students to their account, and I'm sure IBM and Azure were very excited about this, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah, I'm sure
and
they
I
were.
imagine they got a really good price on those extra 1 million seats, right?
Yeah, no doubt they did. So
So
tell
let's
me
talk
about,
tech. Let's talk security. What do you have on your mind? What can we share that's for your benefit and for those that would be watching this later?
well, one of the things we're doing, and we have taken on, we saw the value in offering some better solutions to our clients is around bot security and the emergence of bot security and all those threats associated with that because the emergence of AI and what's going on there. So that's an area that we really lean forward into with our
hmm
clients. And I don't hear much talk about that in the industry, although with our clients, you listen to them in terms of what's going on with malicious bots. It's really taken on a new threat vector for them that
Sure.
didn't really
Um,
cover for.
well, a lot of these bots are supercharged now, right?
Right.
And so, but I'm curious. Give me your problem statement. I think I'll offer it, and then you refine it. Um, Everyone has a web presence.
Yep.
Everyone wants to interact with prospects and customers,
Mhm.
and more than half of your traffic is non-human.
Yep. That's
And
correct.
so you can mitigate it with a good WAF, right? And cloud protections from CDNs like Cloudflare,
Mhm.
CloudFront, where you can write rules that detect bot behaviors and that block bots from ever reaching even the point of a CAPTCHA that would be attached, to filling out a form requesting further information, right?
Right.
Or downloading a PDF or something. Any kind of milestone transaction on your website can be gamed and abused and potentially misused, for other malicious purposes than just annoying the heck out of the other side of that automation, right? Because
Right.
when you get like, all these silly, alerts, maybe some people even have push alerts, to their sales team that tells them when someone just downloaded the white paper, let's go get that deal, right? Let's go, transact and convert. And so I think that it's interesting to think about aggressive WAF protections.
Mhm.
For example, I often run a command from a command line using
Right.
curl to test out a request and see if it generates an error and to see what the headers are. So I don't really care about the contents of the payload of the
Mhm.
response. I want to look at the headers. So I usually do curl dash capital I and then fill in the name of target, API address or website. And I use it to also assess what the application stack is built on, because the headers tell you, oh, this is an Apache server, or oh, this is an IIS server. Oftentimes it'll even tell you what exact version it is, which tells me that they're not patching their software and they're not, controlling information disclosure in those headers. And so that's usually a pretty easy lift for me to just run a curl command against any company's website. Download a couple of the DNS dumpster entries that show some of their other entries for things that they have, right? It's like enumerating their DNS records offline by going to these third-party sources. And then just, iterating through all of them and saying, okay, it looks like you have a mixture of X, Y, Z. I can confirm that these versions are vulnerable and can be exploited. And so that's usually a nice walk-up, right? If you're trying to do consulting and security offices, services. Or if you are trying to partner with someone, you don't want their third-party attack surface to cause grief for you, right? Because they get breached, and then you end up getting involved in their breach because they have some of your data. So that's certainly been the third-party risk management approach I've taken for years, even before I joined Security Scorecard. But anyway, you tell me, what is the statement of the problem to be solved here in terms of bots?
And it depends on the business sector. And I'll give you an example. Let's take online retailing. Totally different, right? Totally different than online.
A lot of abandoned shopping carts and really shitty conversion ratios. Yeah.
Well, and it's different from the online gaming industry. Different use cases. So, and we're dealing with both right now, like FanDuel, et cetera, NFL, et cetera. But when it specifically around retail, what we are finding with the retailers is these bots are able to bypass those security controls like an Akamai.
Sure, all you have to do is spoof your user agent header to look like a human.
And what happens is it is impacting their conversion rates.
Right? Correct, because those are never going to actually click buy. They're just there to like tie up assets, potentially buy Taylor Swift tickets, or at least make them run out early. Right?
Yeah, so that has become a huge threat
area of that needs improvement.
Not only that, account takeovers is another area that has taken on a new meaning, and you mix into there the emergence of info stealers, right? And that's where we're seeing a lot of use cases for our clients now, and while we kind of really jumped into that area to help them remediate those threats. So
well, info stealers in my mind are going to be often the attack vector I think of is somebody installing a Chrome extension that purports to be an ad blocker, but it's actually a credential stealer, right?
Right.
So I think the war has moved, in my mind, from like this kind of like DMZ in the three-tiered architectures of the 90s, where we just put a firewall in front of it and then put another firewall on the other side of the DMZ, and we're good because we've mitigated the risk of internet-facing stuff. Well, now identity is the new perimeter. There is no moat around the castle, right? Or at least it's useless because you can just buy through an initial access broker any credential for any company you want. Right?
Sure.
And it's only going to be 1 or 2 characters off from any of the breach data set passwords that are in Have I Been Pwned and other dark web sources, right? So really we have to assume breach, we have to assume compromise, we have to assume insiders, threat actors are already on your network, potentially doing a smash and grab, which would be ransomware, shut you down, try to put you out of business and get paid through extortion tomorrow. Or they're on a low and slow play, like what happened with some of the Chinese threat actors with NXP, the Dutch chip maker. They had been breached for like 2-3 years, had no idea. And Transavia was getting an investigation into their breach. And the researchers saw the threat actors' IPs, started tracking them with NetFlow and trying to figure out where the traffic's going. And like, hey, wait a minute. Why is all this traffic also going from these command and control servers to the NXP headquarters, in the Netherlands? So they call them up and say, hey, you guys have been breached for the last, well, we don't know how long, but this traffic goes back as far as we've been looking a couple of years. And so they're doing the remediation of a parallel breach. And that's how, obviously it's very embarrassing for your chips to have backdoors that were introduced by Chinese threat actors into your design process, right? And you didn't know it. You had no visibility into the egress traffic or ingress traffic. And I really think that the myopia here is that everyone thinks of a firewall as like this security blanket that protects them.
Mhm.
And I guess we're guilty of introducing it as a product, back in the 90s to say, hey, we can't really afford to have our naked services running on the internet. So let's put an inline device that's just charged with saying yes or no to every request that comes in. And you eventually write more complicated rules and potentially crowdsource them and have dynamic injects based on behaviors, and you get some really cool next gen firewalls in play. But it's still just a stopgap against really shitty security on the endpoint, on the host itself. That's why you had to put a firewall in front of it, right? Now, if we think, all right, the bad actors are on the inside, bad guys, bad girls. I like to be equally opportunistic about the gender and pronouns of threat actors. And
Right.
you have to imagine that, they're actually able to bypass anything, including MFA. There's several good talks, from previous security conferences talking about how this happened. And I think even FireEye had an MFA bypass when SolarWinds and APT29 went after them. They were able to light up an old disabled admin account and enable it and start logging in as it. So they didn't actually create an account. They just re-enabled one that had been disabled for someone that had been offboarded. So that speaks to the whole problem of access management and how Windows doesn't ever let you delete things. You can only disable them, right? And so that's a challenge. But really that event of re-enabling an admin privileged user should have been monitored and tracked. But getting back to your point about bots in e-commerce, I think there's a lot of people that are doing advertising in that moment, right? When you have a cart and you're trying to shop, and then you might transact and you may buy the things in your cart or you may abandon the cart. And they call it intent analysis, right? And they may actually start selling you or pitching other products or even other third-party services while you're in that shopping cart loaded session. And they're trying to monetize, and come up with revenue, shares of, saying other people like you, homogenization kind of algorithms. Other people like you also wanted to buy sugar when they buy coffee because they like to put sugar in their coffee, right? Yep. And so the idea here is that the entire e-commerce engine is meant to try to just be, get drawn to the site through an external ad somewhere, register or have a quick purchase option, right? Where you just simply provide your credit card details and payment information and you check it out and you ship it. And then later they try to back end fill out who you are and let you create an account and a profile and then get marketed to. So there's usually like a fast path to check out, and then a longer path, right? Where you actually log in and create a profile, maybe even tell them about yourself, right? And provide information on the site, whether it's Expedia, as an example, or hotel bookings, on certain properties direct. So I think that the challenge is that there's some really good technology that does these sort of micro auctions as to what ads to show you while you're browsing and other cross-sell and upsell opportunities. And they have this incredible engine of real time to evaluate what to display. So they're looking at your IP address, they're looking at your back-end data broker profile that they've ingested quickly to figure out, but really, there's tons of intelligent information security telemetry visible in that data as well. Like, for example, I'm on a MacBook Pro, I'm running Chrome, I have the latest version, I'm coming from an IP address, which is my usual egress, internet connection from home through my provider. All of those parameters should line up to show that I'm not a bot.
Right.
So why can't they take this intent analysis engine to pitch you based on whether they think you're 18 to 35, single, married, travel the world, higher education degree? They have all this enriched profile data about sales. Why don't they just add a few risk indicators as well to those profiles? Because then these intent engines for e-commerce can be evaluating the security posture of the transaction and to know whether it's a compromised account that's being browsed through a DigitalOcean server out of New York, right? Or if it's a compromised account coming from, Colorado. The bad actors are getting smart enough to start proxying through local IP addresses, through compromised assets at universities and other.
Especially localized home IP addresses.
Correct. So they may breach someone's home address not to do nasty things to them, but just to be able to use it as a point of egress.
That's right.
And to look like normal, legitimate traffic, right? That isn't going to get triggered by anomaly detection. Because really what we're talking about here is how hard is it to simply block the next request from a bot when it starts demonstrating either bot-like behaviors, or you're able to attribute, some type of anomaly to what's going on, like the speed at which it clicks, other types of things can use. Does the mouse actually like kind of wander with those kind of heat map tracking tools and technologies? Of course, half of those things never actually provide any signal when a person turns off cookies and beacons and tracking, and parsing of JavaScript, or they're able to successfully emulate it on the bot side. So I'm guessing that the problem is twofold, at least in this area, which is what stuff can you just simply discard immediately because it violates a gross or coarse, kind of control. Like this is a known malicious, IP address from a cloud service provider that doesn't care that people are doing malicious credential stealing or bot behaviors from that network, right? And now it's not just DigitalOcean we're talking about any cloud service provider is being abused in this way. So it's really difficult to do it based on IP reputation at this point in time, because you have all these home IPs which have legitimate user end traffic. You have all of these cloud service provider IPs, 70 million or so, that are ephemeral. They could be a good user today and a bad user in a bot tomorrow.
That's right.
So I think IP address is really not that. What do they call it? They call it sparsity of signal, right? So IP addresses are just not that meaningful anymore. Some of them are, of course. Some of them are very static. They don't change hands, So really, I think we need to have classification of IP addresses based on how dynamic they are with the user behaviors observed from various people that have that kind of technology to collect that telemetry. So I think it'd be pretty easy to identify which ones are sort of static and which ones are kind of problematic IPs, and make sure you just have some really good source of blocking for anything that's emergent, right? Again, crowdsourcing is really powerful here in terms of reputation, whether it's Cisco Talos, or other vendors, blacklists, for spamming, and other types of reputations maintainers. So it might be cool to get them together and to come up with ways of consolidating that, right? I think there's a good 200 different reputation, trackers out there. So maybe that would be a useful space for some security vendor and for customers to demand this, that we start consolidating and having less of these, because more is not better.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
In terms of IP reputation. Then once you get to mitigations of like JavaScript and, getting the ability in your shopping cart to protect against bot behavior. Now you've turned off the course level controls, which would be like a WAF saying, oh yeah, we have no reason to let this ever even through to your load balancer, let alone your actual web server. There's best practices that have yet to be fully deployed in terms of how you do session state and management, and whether people can hijack those sessions or inject SQL into it and things like that. And so I think that's an area of improvement that a lot of people don't invest in, because it entails finding a really good developer and a really good InfoSec person and locking him in a room for a week and coming up with some revs, to the code on the website that says, hey, you finally implemented OWASP top 10. Yay!
Hey.
No one's implementing OWASP top 10 because why? We have an OWASP top 10 that is constantly populated with breach events related to just stupid user coding tricks, right?
Yep.
So I think that's definitely one direction of tackling it, and that's education. That's not a technology thing. We have the technology to build more robust shopping carts.
Yep.
So anyway, those are some of my musings on that area, on that topic. But why is it not a heartfelt, like vendor, championed kind of thing? I'm not sure why. I guess people are just distracted by the shiny things. They want to go after the 0 days, and it's no fun to go after a mundane, bot attack. Do you have any anecdotes that you want to share about like customer stories that you can anonymize?
Well, yeah, I talk about conversion rates. I can anonymize. We just are completed one of the major online luxury retailers, and that was a big problem for them. And what they found out was, again, I focus on conversion rates because that was the most recent one that we did with our partner, and the impact to the business and the revenue stream and all the downstream effects of that, and the fraud that was involved in that as an outshoot of that. And so that's starting to get attention. Then if you talk to like FanDuel, another client, right, where same issue, especially this past weekend.
FanDuel won't be unhappy that we're recording this conversation.
No, it's a use case, public use case that was put
Okay.
out there by our partner. So yeah, and it's same issues, and so depending on the business sector you're in, whether it's online
Well,
gaming.
so in FanDuel's case, let's drill in real quick. If I wanted to make money off of FanDuel, I would say, hey, you guys are offering like real money as credits. Why don't I just go harvest, 20,000 of these $30 free accounts and then do some betting, do some transfers, figure out some way to actually extract that value from the system and convert it into hard cash. Is that part of the
Right.
scenario?
That's part of the scenario. Plus,
That's straight up fraud then. Yeah.
yeah, straight up fraud in your account takeovers, right?
Right.
Was an issue, and credential stuffing was a big issue for them.
Sure. No,
Big
that's
issue.
true because it's a stupid user at this case, but you can't be like 23andMe and say, you should never have used the same password for your DNA as you did for your gym membership.
Right.
Different value
Right.
of asset on the other side.
Yeah. So I can say FanDuel because it's public. The business case was issued
Sure.
publicly
And,
and
and and
all
I
that.
can
So
just theorize without even knowing any, material insider information about what the risk is and how you might try to mitigate it. Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
So
some of
that's
this
what
stuff
we're
is so
seeing.
onerous. When I think
Yeah.
about like StubHub or buying tickets, on Ticketmaster, I couldn't actually get my US Open tickets on my computer because they only trust the mobile.
Right. Really.
Yeah, they're aggressive, like blocking and identifying and telemetry anomaly detecting was totally skewed away from my desktop using my home internet connection, right? And so I couldn't actually get my US Open tickets this last summer. IBM
Oh
gifted me a
wow.
lovely VIP pass for me and my
Right.
son. We got to see, like the number one seed. What's his name? The Italian, not Italian, the Spanish player, Alcaraz,
Right.
right there in the corner, right?
Wow.
Watching the serves and seeing him towel in front of us. No one in front of us, free drinks,
Oh
lots
yeah.
of great VIP stuff. Anyway, this is the benefit of being a CISO and knowing people at IBM. But the fun part about it was just obviously my frustration of not actually being able to produce my ticket on a computer. I had to use the phone, and I had to
Yeah.
take the phone
Yep.
off of my home Wi-Fi because my home Wi-Fi was egressing with the same IP address, which had some kind of like, oh, our weirdness detector is going off here. And so, why do they trust a mobile IP network, IP for my phone and my request and my session and my activity, more so than a computer? Because mobile has a lot less protections in terms of DNS firewall and
Oh
anomalies,
yeah.
and
Right.
endpoint agents. Most people don't have a very sophisticated, endpoint agent like Lookout or something installed on their
Right.
phones,
Right.
whether it's a corporate phone or a personal phone. So anyway, I'd have to question the tuning of their anomaly detection in Ticketmaster's
Yeah,
case.
it's a good
But
idea.
in the end of the day, I could get what I needed. But you're right. So FanDuel is being defrauded in pre-internet era. That would have just been called shrinkage, right? Due
Yeah.
to shoplifting or insider threat. People selling stuff off the back of the truck and saying, "Oh, it got lost in transit," right?
Yeah.
And retail has
Yep.
taken this as a given for so long, right?
Oh yeah.
There's certain
Yeah.
levels of fraud that they just expect. But
Yep.
really, technology ought to be in a position to help us reduce that. And so you're basically paying for your service if you can come up with the mousetrap that does a better job of blocking bots through coarse grain or fine grained controls.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. So that's and you're absolutely right. So we have seen struck a strong emergence in that area, and so that's one of the big things we're focusing on. And we brought a partner in that does us with us and combined our forces and doing all that. So it's
Yeah.
been good, and that's where a lot of our attention is right now, coupled with our
Sure, because
forensics.
that's an
So
easy sell because you've already got pain, you've got an open wound, and you're
mhm.
losing blood, right? As
Right.
a body, a corporate entity. And at some level, your higher level execs are just saying, well, let's just try to keep it at around 7 to 8% shrinkage, right? Or 7 to 8% fraud. It's just the cost of doing business. But no, I
Yeah.
think we can definitely do better. Um, what would be more interesting to tackle this problem if I were a consultant of FanDuel, and I think I know the CISO there.
Yeah, I know him as well, but yeah,
Is it Aga?
I think it might be.
Yeah, yeah. He used to be at uh, WeWork actually. Um,
Okay.
and but he's great. He's talented. He's smart. I'm sure he's on top of it. But there's a scaling problem here, I think. Right? I don't know what the
Yep.
quantity of traffic is going to FanDuel, but I'm sure it's millions of transactions per second that they have to inspect and decide yay or nay. Right?
Right.
Um, what might be interesting would be to try some A/B testing and to not just apply all rules to all traffic. So if you do some A/B testing, you could try some more sophisticated, heuristics and anomaly detection, and you can just experiment your way towards less shrinkage. And I don't know that people always keep that basic scientific method in mind, right? Where you just control for one value, you have a hypothesis, and then you test the hypothesis, right? This is like data-driven InfoSec. If you want to know what the good call to action is on a long haul flight from Amsterdam to Asia Pacific, I mention this case because I actually worked on KLM's infrastructure, put them behind Akamai, and started doing A/B testing on what's the call to action that gets people to click on an offer to get a discount on a long haul flight from Amsterdam or Germany or something to Asia Pacific, because they wanted to encourage this, right?
Sure.
And so we built up something that loaded up all Flying Blue members into memory. So number one, you need enough memory in your web server to be able to load all that into memory, because you need to be able to provide a cross sell, upsell, or a denial, right, to the actual transaction flow from like nanosecond level, right, not microsecond level. So you need memory access rate speeds, not disk access speeds, to be able to take an evaluation of the risk of the transaction or the veracity of the identity, right? And to be able to take a logical calculation on it. So anyway, we loaded up all the FB members, and we have, this might be a little bit inside baseball, but it's probably changed since I lived in Holland, which is like, I want to say 2013, like 11 years ago. So I'm presuming, we all know that you have like silver, gold, platinum, whatever. But they actually had something on the order of like 14 levels of loyalty.
Wow.
So they had different micro segmentations, of like white wingers, which would be like a college student getting their first credit card, making it a KLM, Flying Blue, Air France, credit card, and getting loyalty points. And anyway, so you pitch totally different things to like a student booking a flight to like, a hedge fund manager and his spouse, right, booking a flight. And so it's interesting to have this kind of profiling. But again, it just doesn't have to be focused on e-commerce. You can also bring in some of these InfoSec telemetry, like how many breach entries are there for this user on Have I Been Pwned, right? Are they really, it's not their fault necessarily, unless it's credential stuffing where it was the same password on 20 different sites, they all got breached, and show up there. But you can actually gauge and almost score, and here's my security scorecard kind of history, background, and love of quantification of risk. You can actually score the user based on their propensity to be a credential stuffer, right? And you could have a more, friction-filled, e-commerce transaction process for them. You might lose a little bit. Everyone wants frictionless, but let's be fair, you have to have a little friction. Otherwise, computers can't defend you against, bots. So you'd have to have certain types of things that are not just, show me the crosswalks and streetlights, in this CAPTCHA, right? CAPTCHAs can easily be evaded now with all sorts of these integrations with, computer vision and machine learning and AI. So I think we need different types of indicators of risk on these transactions that could distinguish between a high risk user, a low risk user profile, and then let the low risk user profile have a faster path towards transaction, and you'd have a lower fraud rate. So I think might be interesting too is if you tell me, if you can, the conversion rate is the KPI that's been blessed and anointed and decided upon. But is that just one massive number for the entire population of users? Because you could do it by North America versus non-North America. You could do it by like domainname.com versus domainname.edu, right? So if the user's email address, not their IP address, but their email address is edu, you might have a lot less fraud going on in the EDU
Right.
space, right? And
Right.
so how can you slice it and dice it to make it easier for some of the fast pathing to happen without a whole bunch of computational back end calculus of the risk of the transaction, of letting this person hit the submit button with a fraudulent credit card or with
Right.
a business email compromise as a part of the picture? And so how can you pick up on the telemetry that this user is a high risk user?
Yeah, that's takes a little more sophistication.
Yeah, no, and I think it's useful to think
Yep.
about the whole browser
It
angle
is.
again, because
Yep.
you can interrogate some of the things about Chrome, and you can say, "Well, I don't want you to tell me whether or not they have like a MetaMask extension installed." MetaMask is used for Ethereum trading. I
Right.
would immediately flag that person as an idiot and a total risk because they're visiting really dumb websites that are not protected well, and they're going to have their millions of dollars of investment stolen, right? That's just,
Stolen,
as
right.
far as generalizations go, crypto clients and crypto traders that want to put their Ethereum wallet in a Chrome extension, that's definitely frictionless risk, but lots
Oh,
and
yeah.
lots of risk, you know.
Yeah.
And so anyway, you can't interrogate whether they have a particular extension, but you could potentially calculate how many browser extensions they have. So let's say the browser, only has two extensions, one for like an encrypted email and another one for, I don't know, ad blocker or something. And those are both installed by the corporate profile through the MDM, right? The mobile device management.
Yep.
And you would say, okay, this is a low risk user because they're not really promiscuous with their installation of, extensions. But if you see someone that has like 15 extensions installed, you're going to think, oh, so maybe the browsers can help us identify, but then of course, I guess the bots could eventually try to lie and say, I only have 2 extensions. I'm a good person,
Right.
But anyway, those are some directions that occurred to me, which is don't just turn one massive KPI into conversion. Look at conversions within identifiable subsets of your market and focus on the ones that are high fraud, obviously, because certain ones like edu versus .com or day browser versus night browser, there could be geographic time kind of parameters here. They could be strong indicators of fraud that people just aren't doing it because all they're thinking about is how to sell. They're not thinking about how to sell safely. And so they may be ignoring a whole bunch of telemetry that exists that could be leveraged to come up with a score on the risk of the transaction of letting them hit the submit button.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's an excellent point.
I like to think that I can think these things up on the fly like this. That's
You can. I've talked to you before, and I know that's why I love talking with you. Listening to
well, thanks. Yeah.
You're right, and that sophistication to that level, at least some of the clients, it doesn't exist, and so
Sure.
having
No, at the very least,
discussion, yeah,
at the very least, what they're doing is they're doing it on the back end in Splunk. Right? Like if you're in financial services, you're going to have an anti-money laundering and scamming and other things. They don't actually care, I found out, too much about business email compromise because they're completely without blame. Right. The correct credentials were entered. It's not our fault that you lost them or let someone, key log them and log in as you. So they're more concerned about fraud than about scamming. And I delineate the two as like scamming is when you convince someone to do something dumb. Right. But they actually do it with their login on their computer, right? So you socially engineered them into issuing a payment, for something that is completely bogus, right? Non-existent or fraudulent. But the fraud part is interesting because financial services will invest millions of dollars to tweak, a few points, and to reduce that. Because again, they automatically calculate huge amounts of loss just as a given. Right. And so if you can come up with a good back-end Splunk where you can sort of gather all this data at your leisure and on a daily or a weekly basis, aka horse has already left the barn, you can at least come up with an algorithm that could potentially predict it in the future, right? That's the hope, right? You write all these Python libraries and apps that are embedded into Splunk, and you're like, oh, okay, we can use this telemetry here, and we can use this information there, and this public information there, and then we can come up with a profile, and then we can segment, and then we can cut off, the peak and shave the peaks a little bit on the fraud hours or the fraud users and the fraud transactions. One of the fun anomalies I remember reading about years ago was if you want to get your credit card blocked in 10 seconds, buy a pair of sneakers and 2 tanks of gas. Because that's the profile that they've configured. It's like, oh, this is a stolen card, right? You're going to gas up your car and gas up your buddy's car. And then you're going to go buy some like $2,000, Travis Scott reverse logo Nike sneakers. And that's like a recipe for instant block, right?
Yeah.
But of course, some of these frauds and some of these slow organized crime, essentially, they want to avoid those triggers.
That's
What's
right.
fascinating is that you can actually write algorithms that detect threshold avoidance. So, for example, if you're in financial services, anything that's a $10,000 and up transaction in the US, you have to file what's called a SAR, a suspicious activity report. That threshold is like $20 in Indonesia. If you've got $20 to spend, you're a suspicious individual. 20 US, that is, right? So it varies by geography, what is considered a suspicious activity. And so if you want to avoid a SAR being filed, you are going to transfer $9,000, repeatedly. But you can clearly write an algorithm that's going to detect FBOs for the benefit of who the eventual payer or payee is, for these transactions. And you can actually stitch them together and say, okay, yeah, they're moving, more than $10,000. We need to know who it is. Is it, terrorism, right? Is it extortion? Is it ransomware? And so there are ways to algorithmically block threshold avoidance, but you have to actually think about it and think that the bad actors actually know what your blocking thresholds are. And so, for example, when I was at Marvel, we had all sorts of botnets coming at us. Again, probably not all of it nation state or organized crime, probably from our own rabid fans, right? They wanted to try to break into the system to get access to unreleased footage or free Marvel comic subscriptions or whatever. And so they would detect our WAF rules very quickly, right? And so we actually had to vary them every now and then just to keep them on their toes. And so let's say if you came at us, I'm just going to invent some numbers, I don't remember them anymore. Let's say you came up at us with like 50 requests per second from your IP address for comic panels from our API. We'll block you for 24 hours, right? Because that's clearly not human generated traffic. That's someone trying to slurp down the whole catalog of comics, right? And that's a violation of terms of service. But if you come at us with a slower threshold, I don't know, even 25 requests per second, or let's say you go super aggressive and you hit like 1,000 requests a second. Well, we're going to block you for 72 hours because that's an obvious, egregious violation of what is needed for an actual tablet, phone, or computer to consume comics and look at panels and read them and then ask for the next comic panel, right? So it was really easy for us to identify threshold avoidance because we would see people coming in at 499 requests per second, right? And so they could do what they needed to do and not get blocked. And so you really need to rotate the frequencies like they do in Star Trek. We need to go to shield modulation for the Klingons. We need to go to 83 hertz and then 99 hertz, and so that's it's clearly signals intelligence. That's possible. You can modulate your rules to screw with threshold avoidance and detection. The other thing that was interesting was to think about ways to inject deception technologies is what I'm going for, right? So if you know it's a bot, waste the bot's time. Redirect it to a quicksand load balancer that just slowly starts having like 1,000 milliseconds latency, 2,000 milliseconds latency, right? And so it thinks it's a degraded network connection for whatever reason, but you're just basically tying up the bot's resources in quicksand, right? So you can create deception networks that siphon off this traffic for the bots because they're still going to stay engaged and they're not going to reprogram and come at you with a brand new approach, right? And so you're basically agreeing to dance with them, but off in a corner that's not related to an actual transaction where they could hit submit, or they think they hit submit. And then it's like, okay, we're going to send you the code. And then you give them like a response code that says, oh, this is a partial. This is like a status code 206. You got to request it again, right? And you just basically waste their time. All you can do in cyberspace is deprive your enemies of time or treasure. And if you can't actually extract money from these bots, then you just want to waste their time.
Right. Makes sense.
Hello, David. David
Berger.
I just couldn't resist, Mike.
Awesome. Welcome to the party. We've been having a great conversation, and it's going to get even better now that you're here.
Do I know you, Bob? Do I know Bob Henderson?
Of course you do. You just don't remember.
Well, that's more true than I'm almost ready for the White House. What?
Well, when I was on a call with you this morning on the breakfast.
Oh, you were. That's what you were there. Okay.
But even before then, years and years ago,
right?
The Spear technology sound familiar?
Yes, very Rita's crew.
You and I met when I was doing consulting for them years and years ago.
Oh, okay.
When you were up in Connecticut.
I was working
Yeah,
out
yeah.
of Connecticut. Yeah, I was working out of Connecticut. I'm out here in Jersey. I work out in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut,
Right.
wherever there's a nail to hammer.
Well,
You know what I mean?
good.
Yeah, trying the same old.
You know, it's something to do. You know.
Well, for those of you that don't know, David Berger, otherwise known as Berger, to those
Are
who
there other people other than me, you, and Bob on this call? Let me just ask that in advance. Or is
not
that it?
in real time, no, there'll be people listening, watching the recording later. But no,
Oh,
this is just
sure.
a private chit chat. This is what office hours is supposed to be like. It's not supposed to be
Okay.
hundreds of people. So,
That's fine.
but Berger is a accomplished leader for many years, at protecting money that wants to make money. So he worked for a hedge fund, right? And so.
Yep.
Yeah, now I'm with a vendor that we do a lot of work with. So I work with, I guess, 4 hedge funds now because we are a supplier to them of intellect.
So you're the attack surface now. You're not the actual citadel.
Well, we're the we like to think that we are a conduit of non-proprietary goodness through the industry.
Oh, I like that.
Right.
It's a little long. I don't know if I can dance to it.
Yeah, well,
but
the word goodness isn't that good, but non-proprietary. I mean, kind of like McKinsey in the business world, they create that common set of words and common set of knowledge, right? Without presumably betraying, anything proprietary or internal. So we can apply what we learn in other places to another place, provided that it's not proprietary.
Understood. So you're basically disseminating a community of practice among a bunch of citadels of wealth and personal wealth management. I had
I like that. I like that citadel with a small c there.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
By the way, have you seen Dumb Money?
Yes, I did see Dumb Money.
Did you like it?
I think it was a little from a purely. I mean, I like the idea of it. I think from a purely slapstick, it was too slapstick for me. Right.
It had Pete Davidson, and he stole the show.
Right.
I don't know if you know this, Bob. Dumb Money just came out on Netflix, and it's about the squeeze, the GameStop story.
Right.
Great. Entertaining as hell. It's a double-edged sword, though, because I found out watching the credits that it was actually produced by the Winklevoss twins.
Oh, was it really?
wow.
I did not know that.
You did not know that, yeah. So they're out there saying, hey, guess what? The little guy can win because the system's rigged against you, but not really. We just want to give you the hope by putting a bunch of people like Seth Rogen and Pete Davidson into a film and make you laugh,
Yeah, I mean, it was a caricature, and what it failed to do, I think, is explain concisely what a short squeeze is, right? So everyone knew. They said it was bad, and they said it's happening, and these guys are losing money, but it really never explained what it was.
And it's hard to stitch a narrative against a bunch of people just sitting in front of a stock ticker, right? So
they said the internet beat up a bunch of rich guys, which is interesting.
It's kind of cool. It's kind of like Robin Hood, not the firm that was mentioned in the movie, but actually, the archetype of take from the rich, give to the poor. But at the end of the day, I think the Winklevoss twins, being involved in it,
the Winklevi be the plural,
made me believe that this is just playing into the narrative that old money, strong money, powerful money, connected money will always protect its own interests very successfully, and that it's just a fool's errand, like what's his face tilting at windmills, Don Quixote. You're off riding Rocinante. I think that was the name of his horse, right? And you're gonna have fun, and maybe someone's gonna love you, and maybe you'll win a battle or two. But at the end of the day, nothing's going to disrupt the status quo on this.
Well, except what's interesting is the players in there. The
Steve Cohen, excellent acting job by Vincent D'Onofrio as well. I love him. Good. He was so good, but especially right in the beginning. It was like, I think I just came.
You think of them as old money, but 30 years ago they were new money.
That's true. Old money is the one that came over on the Mayflower.
These guys aren't. I mean, I think they were comfortable, but these guys aren't, like Vanderbilts or Carnegie.
That's true. No one's making a movie about disrupting that.
Right. but and the lesson is that everybody does what they do to protect themselves, right? Except in this case, this band of merry
Social
men,
justice
yeah,
investors on Reddit. Yeah.
take the Robin Hood extension, you know, and then in small pieces they can take a lot of risk, right? Because in small people you can take a lot. So it's, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting. You know, it's
Well, what would be the InfoSec take on risk management and lessons learned from this film?
well from that
Would
film.
be,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
well, obviously it's who you know if you need to shut down Robin Hood's, buy or sell button, right?
Well, interesting if you want to, if you really want to talk about it. So that begs the, you know, when you talk about uh information security, CIA, right, at the traditional channels.
Confidentiality, integrity, and availability for those
But
following
rarely,
along who are not,
right,
InfoSec professionals.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, but rarely do you talk about integrity, right? You rarely talk about integrity. Talk about
No,
confidentiality.
and I think people think about it as like a philosophical and moral, thing. And
Right,
it's like, is the integrity of your CISO, impeccable and
right.
beyond reproach? And it's like, no. Integrity means changing Wikipedia to say things happen that didn't happen, right? That's
Well,
where there's a really interesting, like the edit wars that happen on Wikipedia.
yeah.
That is a festering hole of, OCD plus political, backstory,
Well, integrity. The way I look at integrity
disinformation.
is, you know, you look at a number, right, on a system, and you say it's $75 million, and you say, well, what makes you think that's right?
Yeah.
Just because it says $75 million, or when we were doing some wires, we were just thinking about, you know, one wire is send $1 billion, another wire is not send $1 billion, and think of that one tiny piece of microcode,
A
right?
little bit flipped. Yeah.
Right, from where your mouse is hovering, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, from where your mouse is hovering from here to here, and if that's wrong, right, presumably bad things can happen, right? Because that guy can, just because he put green up on this one, oh, that one should have been red. I made a mistake.
Correct. And a whole bunch of day traders or algorithmic traders go and jump and say how high, right?
Right.
It's interesting what you mentioned, though, about the data provenance, is what I like to call it, and data lineage, right? Because as we get into more and more enriched data sets, data brokers and the CIA buying this stuff and other people
Right.
aside, it is important to think about data classification, data provenance, and the transition that certain datas make in their classification. So, for example, my classic go-to is a casting announcement for Marvel, for Captain Marvel, prior to anyone knowing it. It's super, super secret, right?
Right. Well,
The moment it becomes public, its data classification has changed. And so I think what we need is actually a TTL, a time to live, on data classifications as metadata. So you don't just say, this is confidential sensitive, this is PHI, this is PII. You also want to put an expiration date on it, just like we do for DNS, and say, come back and check, in 30 days or 30 years, because your DNA should have a pretty long TTL, right,
well,
to keep private.
a lot of things like, so some stuff is you know, long term, social security numbers, all that kind of stuff, because those are hard to change, right? But most of the information you think of in the business world does have an you know, anything you're doing a deal, right? It's an M&A paperwork, who you buy, you know, that's all secret until the deal's over. Then it's not, well, it could be secret, but it's not particularly secret. But it's
Yeah.
not particularly valuable. Trade information, right? Your positions, right? So your positions of a trading firm decay in value, is actually a decay in value every day, right?
Correct.
Every day,
I mean, if you're looking at intraday P&L,
right.
obviously, midnight or 5 p.m. Eastern or whatever is cutoff point, right? So,
Well, and that's the argument. That's one of the arguments we have with, you know, the age-old argument, to the extent that these are ages, on password expirations, right? So on password expirations, we would often, you know, I would often find, quote, passwords, credentials floating around on the dark web, right? And often is, you know, it's too strong a word, but from time to time we would see that. But we would also see that they were typically old, right? We would see by the time we found them, maybe they're current sometime, but by the time we found them, when we got to them, oh, this guy doesn't even work here anymore. This is a year and a half old, right? So we say, well, this is of no value because we hold passwords every 90 days or 60 days or whatever the period you create is, which is a different from, you know, the more progressive way of thinking is that passwords don't change, right? So there's the friction. I mean, when was the last time you changed your banking password? I mean,
Well, I think it's useful for us to actually, I think, to migrate some of those rotated credentials and tokens and turn them into canary tokens, so that if they do get lit up, they simulate a success, but they also set off a silent duress alarm saying, hey, guess what? Someone just used, this canary token for AWS.
because Yahoo, if I create, and many times I create passwords for what I'll call low, unimportant things, right? Which are dreadful, but you got to create them. And it will tell me your password has already
as a part of a breach data set. Yeah.
Right. Your password has already been, or is already in use, not just part of a breach data, is already in use somewhere.
Yeah.
They can see because they hash.
So you're talking about your ID.me for your paying your taxes this year, right? That password, that's one of your low importance identity passwords.
Well, paying my taxes is an important part. But I'm scheduled to think about that more in April 13th, 14th timeframe.
Yeah. Well, certainly TurboTax had a lot of ads on the Super Bowl. I don't know if you all are happy with the results, but I usually watch it to see if it's a good game. And of course, I love to watch the ads. And I love the fact that there weren't a lot of crypto ads this year. There was more money spent by Jesus than I expected, right?
Yeah.
Well, that was interesting, because whoever is backing that, I guess, Jesus campaign, religious campaign, whatever it's called, faith campaign, I guess. There's a lot of money behind that faith campaign.
Oh, yeah.
$233,333 per second.
200,000 per second. So 60.
233 per second. Yeah.
So 60-second commercials, 12 million. If I did right. Oh,
I can't be bothered to do simple math. I have calculators and generative AI to do that for me.
Yeah, but that's a generative AI. But that's the. But that's, I mean, I don't know. In fact, I'll do some research. I want to know where that money came from, because that was, somebody dropped some big dollars.
Yeah, but what was your favorite one? I'm curious, because we can always then think about the InfoSec angle.
The only commercial I liked, well, and I didn't see them all, by the way. I did not. I was not transfixed by the entire game. But the one I liked was the flying football players that turned into birds. There's eagles and there's cardinals. Yes, I thought that was memorable,
but I don't know what it was for, so it failed utterly.
It was for the NFL itself.
Oh, it was
for the NFL. Yeah, it was for the NFL.
It also failed to impress me that it was an NFL ad. So, but
yeah. Well, the age of it being obvious, like I'd like to buy the world a Coke. The age of it being obvious are gone. Right.
Yeah. That's true. It is about brand and about other elements of spend. I thought that the Uber Eats was fun. That did the whole mirroring of the David Schwimmer Jennifer Aniston relationship as friends. Yeah. Where he was saying, "I hate this town," and you don't remember. What things are easy to remember, right? You don't remember working with 10 years.
Well, again, it's maybe political ramifications of that commercial too. But
oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
Sorry. These days you can politicize anything. But anything with Jennifer Aniston I like, so it's pretty simple.
Speaking of political, the one with Robert Kennedy.
Oh God, what a fuck up that was.
Yeah, it wasn't even him or his campaign or anything.
He did not sign off on it, but he also didn't take it down from his ex account.
No, he
didn't. Twitter, I felt like I was a kid then. It felt like it was the 60s and had the 60s.
I thought it was a parody. I was totally waiting for this to be like Weird Al Yankovic or something, or Saturday Night Live.
I thought it was going to be another candidate who came on and said, look at this.
Right.
But
yeah, my name is what would be a good Jonathan Kennedy or something, right? And I'm running for Albuquerque District 1, council or something, right?
Well, what are you looking? What's that castle behind you? That's some castle you got there.
That is a castle in Czech Republic that I was married in.
Oh, okay. Okay, my guess is people have been married there for like 400 years, probably.
But yeah, that castle is about, I think it was 1200, 1300 is when it was built.
And where are you located, though? Are you in the Czech Republic now, or?
No. My wife is born and raised there. She is dual citizen. We go back every year. We have property. But
so are you in Connecticut or Jersey or New York? Where are you?
I'm in Jersey, Eastern PA right now.
Okay.
Yeah, my headquarters in Jersey. But every year we get over there. We'll be over there again this year for a few months. We have a client. I do a lot of time in Prague, and of course where the castle is in the country. So
That's cool.
Yeah, well, I was there once. I thought it was delightful. Prague was a great little city, and just
yeah,
it was
we're about 2 hours northeast of Prague, near the Poland border. In fact, we were there last year. They have no borders there anymore. Most of
Well,
Europe.
they may be
And
making
we're
a comeback.
driving,
We'll
all of a
see.
sudden, shoot, we're in Poland. I don't want to be in Poland. We had to turn around and get back to Czech.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, you're right. NATO may have a tough,
Yeah, they may be.
a tough haul in the next 4 to 5 years if certain
Oh,
things
yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
One thing though, there was a technology thread that I had discussion on LinkedIn with someone that was remarking about the brand message of Google and their Pixel phone and this partially sighted individual snapping photos with his AI-enabled Pixel versus what Microsoft was pitching, right? And that Microsoft was actually going for like the renegade against the establishment kind of thing, which is bizarre because they're anything but.
I don't remember Microsoft's commercial. I don't remember their commercial.
But what do you think about the Google Pixel ad? Because I'm not going to buy a Google Pixel, out of empathy for the fact that they're helping someone snap, selfies, without being able to see whether everyone's face is in, And then it was a very sweet, momentous moment when the baby's born, right? But
I think I saw that. It struck me as odd too. But I think the idea is that they're trying to use technology in general, right? So kind of my takeaway from it, because I was saying, what are they trying to tell me?
what are they selling? Are they selling the phone, or are they selling the brand that
I
does
think they were
things that makes
selling
people?
the brand as altruistic, right? To use technology to support people that because they do
Sure.
kind of amazing, but other people not so are doing amazing things with technology for disabled people, right? Just
Yeah, but what occurred to me was that the mother-in-law is going to be snapping that photo just as well without the Pixel AI-enabled camera, right? So
it doesn't seem to, it's one of these things to hire to use the blind person to take photos is unusual, but I think that was it, to say, look what we could do with technology, right? Look what we could do. We can enable this person. We couldn't do it before with all this fancy technology, all this stuff. We can now enable this person to do something they couldn't do, right? And
yeah,
then,
he can snap selfies and get an audio cue as to when things are cropped, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
were they challenged Steve Jobs from 20-some years ago when his commercial came out, right?
yeah.
I don't know. Is that what they were trying to do?
oh, that commercial was great. You mean when they
Yeah.
ran out of the
The woman ran out
audience?
through the hammer.
You mean like 1984? Won't be like
Yeah.
1984, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love the phrasing of that, the garden of pure ideology, But of course, Apple is now the garden of pure homogenous devices because everyone updates. And I've always put out a risk end of year kind of, predictions that there's going to be a digital potato famine and that someone's going to write some malware that's going to brick all those iPhones and everyone's going to be on the
Yes.
exact same version.
I have thought.
So the Android world is actually much more immune to one erroneous bit of lack of QA
I
on
have
malware.
thought that, again, whether intentionally or not, right?
Yeah.
Intended or not, they put out an upgrade that just bricks every iPhone in the country, right?
Yeah, or just like I said, a lack of QA on the part of a
Yeah,
threat
whatever.
actor.
Could be,
Yeah,
could be
but-
somebody gets into the stream, right? Either way, either a perpetrator gets in
and there's no Genius bar that's bringing that brick device back.
right,
And
that
so,
really bricks it. That would
Right.
really, that would actually take a couple points off the GDP. I mean, well, I added on because I gotta buy new ones.
but then again, it would introduce a whole bunch of new purchases from fans that are diehards.
Well, that's why it's one of the reasons why they resist the kill switch for cell phones, right? That if you lose your cell phone, it just the cell phone has no value if in fact they can destroy it and deregister it so it can't be used, right? And some people have encouraged companies like iPhone, Apple or Samsung, so that if the right person presses a button, that is just garbage, right? You can't register it, you can't use it, and one of the reasons they resist that because if people do it mistakenly or something, it's very destructive. But it would be good for the
bottom line for the manufacturer.
Well, but that would eliminate.
Sure.
But
it's like planned obsolescence, right?
But
accidental obsolescence.
Yeah, that would be the kind of the windfall
upside.
Yes, the windfall for them. But the idea is that that would eliminate effectively cell phone theft, right? Because now if you steal a cell phone, it's good till you report it. You report it to the police, buttons get pressed, move up to the cloud, and now the thing is worthless, so you can't really use it. anywhere.
I suppose. I mean, but that's kind of like a scorched earth approach to hardware.
Yeah.
But I know we're at 1 o'clock, and I booked an hour for this. We can easily go on and chat because this is
Oh,
a fun conversation.
Is your meter running here, Mike? Or is
We can go any direction you want. What's top of mind for you right now as a security professional? We were talking about bots and bot mitigation before you joined, so you can go back and rewatch, if you want.
Well, so and I have to talk about this myself in a separate meeting so I can get your ideas and look clever, right? The AI, as AI gets introduced, right, which it is being introduced into what I'll say the IAM stream, right, for approvals and certifications and that kind of thing, will the limiting factor be the technology because it just quote doesn't work or have the desired output, or the limiting or no limiting factor, or will be accountability? Because if every the way it works is right now, if people in a company are going to make some number of mistakes a year, call it 100, right? So there's 100 mistakes made a year, right? And that's fine. It's part of the system. There's accountability, and you move on. But when the system, if let's just say the AI certification tool is smarter than people and only makes 10 undesirable assumptions a year or conclusions a year, right? So it's arguably better. One made 100, this one makes 10, right? If you can prove that out, But where is the accountability for those 10 mistakes, right? Because now there's accountability for the 100, right? Bob, you shouldn't have approved this. Oh, I made a mistake. I thought
the accountability would live with the submitter and not the approver.
Well, the accountability never the submitter's asking for it. So the submitter.
I know, but let's say that the AI makes a mistake,
right?
And it only makes 1 in 10 instead of 10 in 10, right? In your example of 100 versus 10 approval errors. I'm guessing it's because it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So the AI has undue trust in the quality of the provenance and accuracy of the input data. That would be the only thing that would be left over for the AI to fuck
AI
up.
is because the AI is going to infer an approval based on a set of characteristics, right?
Correct.
Right? So it infers this approval because
and that's what the human's doing anyway. But if the AI is doing it more consistently,
anyway, right?
Yeah.
But people are allowed to make mistakes, right? So that's separate. People are allowed to make.
Correct, but those 10 mistakes that the AI makes will also be within the 100 that the human makes because it was garbage in, garbage out. The thing that the AI is going to be eliminating.
The human just flat out makes mistakes. Right? Humans are just allowed to just make mistakes, right? You don't have to depend on the data to
Correct,
make.
But that's the 90 out of the 100 are human error.
So the question is, who is held accountable, or where is the accountability? So the accountability for the human mistake is clear, right? It's with the human, whatever that accountability means, right? Whatever that means.
I would argue it's on the submitter and the approver. And then if you put in an AI for the approver, then the submitter should never have submitted the access request for the user that didn't need it, that ended up causing a breach because they were overprivileged. So if you look at this from an analytics point of view.
The submitter is always culpable, right? But the submitter can also be a malintended, right? So you can't blame somebody who's malintended because he's a malintended guy. I mean, that's what he does. He's doing bad things, right? So
they're trying to get free, gift store cards on the Microsoft store so they can buy a Tesla or something, right? They're defrauding.
Take a peek at the company's earnings a couple days early.
Yeah.
Right. I want to take a peek at the earnings a couple days early. That's what I want.
That's an interesting use case. I imagine it's not one that you've invented, entirely hypothetically in your experience, but.
So now I shouldn't have approved his access, right? Yeah, I didn't realize he was off the project, going to be off the project at the end of the month. So I shouldn't have approved it. Fine. Okay, done. Right. Or I just made a mistake. I thought Bob was really Mike. Oh, geez, I got those guys confused. Okay, fine. Right. And you can fire the guy approver, do whatever you want to, right? But,
Well, you're not gonna fire the approver, but you are going to do problem management and try to improve on an RCA. What was the error that made it into the system?
To the morality question from non-access control into more interesting stuff like cars, right? So the challenge you have now with where right now people make mistakes when they're driving, and we just accept that we don't accept it. We have to accept that as a society, right? The guy made a mistake. He just didn't see that other car and he hit it. Why didn't I see it? I don't know, but I didn't see it and I hit it, right? And we just accept.
So now with self-driving cars, where's the accountability?
Right. Where's the accountability? Because it's the same problem. Didn't see it, or there's a decision, right? And and you can use other talks, Mike. The extended decision is two cars, however they got there, are now approaching each other, right, head on, right? However that state occurred, right? And now the outcome is random, right? What will happen is two cars approach is unknown, right? And we don't blame, let's just say, either party, right? Somebody's going to swerve, somebody's not going to swerve. They're going to hit it on, they're both going to swerve. Nobody knows, right? But with AI, there's an opportunity to make a decision. There's going to be a decision there. The AI is going to decide what to do.
Sure.
Right.
No, I've talked about this from a philosophy and ethics point of view, because if you've got a Mercedes and it's the trolley problem, right?
Yeah.
Do you crash the car, or run over the young lady, with a baby, or the old lady with the stroller? Well, utilitarian calculation that might go into the person that's coding this split decision in the Mercedes would say, run over the old lady. She's had a good life. And you don't want to kill two lives that are young, right, and starting out. But what if the driver of the car is not the owner of the car, and so Mercedes is not beholden, and they could actually crash the car into a tree and kill the driver because the driver has terminal cancer and is going to be dead in 3 months, right? So how do you incorporate that kind of level of context?
As all that data becomes, or the simpler case is the two cars are approaching each other. One has 3 kids in the back, right? One doesn't, right? Simplify the case, right? And now you don't know what's going to happen, right? You just don't know. But now you could make a decision, right? All that data is there.
Correct.
Right?
People are writing software to take that decision already.
Right. So now, and you might argue it's the right decision, right? But it doesn't help the guy who's a victim of that decision, right?
Sure. Yeah.
The victim is now, one is I got killed in a car crash is the way we say it now, right? The other way is that you killed me in a car crash.
Correct.
Right. It's right. Well, and there's a difference.
No, that's why I love the fact that my training in philosophy and studies of philosophy are now completely relevant to questions about, technology, algorithms, computer vision.
But that got me to thinking about, in my more mundane world, right? Less interesting than that example, right? But also less bloody, so more fun to think, less taxing to think about, right? Is what do we do, when that, now I granted this guy access, he did something wrong, right? I'm responsible for that, right? Now, it's clear I gave it to him, and you can decide what the penalty is or nothing, right? But now nobody knows why that guy, who approved the access, and that becomes what's interesting is less deterministic because the algorithm is so complex, right? It's actually less, because you don't know what that system is going to decide, and you don't know why it's deciding it, right? It's not really, it's becoming less determined. It's not if then else. So it's really, there's a lot involved in there.
Well, it's true. It's probably less repeatable.
Right. So the person is non-deterministic, and we understand that, but we as a society understand people are non-deterministic. They will make different decisions.
Unless you're that Stanford philosopher who thinks that no one has free will.
Right. Well, but people, given the same set of data, the same person will make different decisions on different days, right? That's, on their emotion, on all these exogenous things, right?
Depending on their mindset,
right.
And frame,
right. And we understand that. But with systems, we're less accommodating, right?
If it's a black box AI algorithm, sure. Yeah.
Right. We're less understanding of that decision. We'll demand to understand how the decision was made, and then who is culpable for that, right?
Yeah.
Who wrote in the, so to speak, in the code, if employee less than 2 years, then skip this check or whatever's going on in there, right? There's
right.
Or the AI inferred that itself based on past experience. I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know if it's interesting, but it's something.
But if you want to think about, I think it's a good discussion. I don't want to run it forever, but there is one thing that I would add. 98% of all granted permissions are unused. So we clearly don't have a principle of least privilege operating across the board right now. This is a recent research on the idea that identity and access management is a big problem. We do need to try to give people just enough to do their job and no more. And we are still over granting permissions, right?
Well, first of all, most positions are low risk, right? Well, most conditions are low risk, so it doesn't make a difference if not. Yes, everybody in the company has access to the corporate lunch menu, but only 3% of the people look at it, right? Who cares, right? So that's one way.
No, but I'm talking about like third party, attack surface, lateral movement, kind of, breach risk through business email compromise. Yeah. If you have 98% more permissions than you need, then there's a bunch more attack vectors that can be pursued.
Here's another two things that create inconsistencies in people speak, but they say them at the same time. Role-based access, right? Mm-hmm. Role-based access and least privilege. Those two things are
in conflict.
Yeah, you're right. Conflict, right?
Yeah.
Because one is a description that you fit into a general box and get the role.
And least privilege is much more behavioral based, meaning you don't even need half the privileges that come with your role, right?
But that's becoming, the trend is more real time. Again, the real time view. If you haven't used it in a few months, you have to re-authenticate or reapprove or something like that. So So again, AI
would be good at paring down those unused permissions.
Right, because it could look at the actual access and say, well, geez, not only did this guy not use it, but the same 5 guys in his department also have it and didn't use it. So I can
remove but think about infrequent catastrophes like fires. You really don't want a fireman or firewoman having to re-up their credentials to break down a door to go in to save a baby in a burning building. And they don't do it often enough, so they may lose the permission to break down doors to save babies.
And also what you find is that permissions not granted are also still important. So one of the things...
I would never want to take away all the DevOps permissions. If I have 5 people with DevOps, if they haven't used it in 30 days, on the 31st day, Murphy's going to guarantee that they're going to need that permission, and you've introduced slowness in their incident response.
But also, the parallel to the real world that you can use is trains, right? So almost everybody takes a train between 7 and 9 a.m. Well, not Mike. Mike's more 10 to 11 a.m. But most of the world.
I don't go out if I can help it.
Right. But and come home between 4 and 7 p.m. Right. So that's 90%, say, or some high percentage of traffic. But people are, or at least I'm reluctant. I'm going to extend my own feelings to the world. Right. Why not? Right. People are reluctant to take that train, even though they know they're not going to take a train till 5 o'clock. If you said there's no trains in the middle of the day, right? There's no trains from 10 to 3. You're going to be less reluctant to take that train because you've lost that flexibility that you may never use, or likely will never use, but you want that flexibility anyway. Right.
That's one of the differences between the perception of security and the reality of security. Right. Yeah.
I will never take a 2 o'clock in the afternoon train ever, but I want it there.
Yeah, in case you need to get home for an emergency and the bridges are like blocked by terrorists, and you got to get home.
I want it there. Right. Yeah. I want that sense of empowerment to use it if I want to, even though I know I never will.
Correct. It's a cognitive dissonance between your perception of freedom and your actual exercise of freedom.
And access may be like that too. Even though I'm never going to look over there, right? I want to be able to.
It depends on what the risk reward is, because if the risk of having that unused permission is huge,
and that's why you call it privileged access management, but that's why most access is also
over provisioned.
Right. Yeah. In a sense, we care too much about things that count too little. Because I went through an exercise at a company, right? And we was the old crown jewels exercise. Right. The old crown jewels exercise. So you go to those department heads or department managers, you say, what are the crown jewels? What is really important? And they list it. Oh, this is important and this is important. Our business plans are important. And they list all these things. And I say, okay. One reason maybe I had to leave this firm, right? But I said, okay, right? Bad news, all of that was released yesterday on the internet. All of it. Okay. Are we going to make less money next quarter? No, not really. Are we going to be in any regulatory trouble? Let's assume that it's not. It's just, no, not really. So why was it so important? So there is a sense of importance for things that really aren't important or aren't very important. There's a sense that things are very important when they're only modestly important. We can't.
No,
release
that's true. I mean, we're bad at gauging risk as humans, right? So when you ask people up front, what is the business impact analysis of a loss of the ability to transfer your regulatory required files at 4:45 p.m. on a trading day, right?
Right.
That could be $50,000 a minute.
Right, that's a monetary right, so you can monetize
Right.
that,
Yeah.
right? Right. And
But
also,
you're right. A lot of people ascribe value to things that, should they lose them, there's really no good quantifiable
right.
justification
You
for the
spoke
amount of
about
importance that
taxes
was
earlier.
placed on it. Yeah.
Now, taxes are private, right? And that's just an arbitrary rule we've made. Absolutely arbitrary. In fact, when income taxes were first filed, I believe they were not private because they were government filings. And like every other government filing, they were public, and then it caused problems. But let's just say I'm filing my taxes, and let's just say they do get released. Maybe some minor embarrassment or humiliation from you, Mike, in terms of some of the numbers that you see. Right, I might be a little bit embarrassed. And
Unlikely.
Really, but other than that, right? And you want to talk more provocatively? That's why I say privacy. Mike, I come up with these things like privacy is a modern invention. Privacy has only been around about 200 years.
There's interesting. Yeah, I've had this thought train, and maybe we'll park it and resume next Wednesday when we do this again, because it's fun. But remember in the days of like the Prince and the Pauper, and the Prince goes on walkabout, and the King does this. That's because no one knew what the King looked like. Now all you had to do is put on some grubby clothes, and everyone assumes that you're just like Monty Python. I didn't vote for him. And so the King could go on walkabout because there was privacy. It was only through certain, modern tools and technologies that turned us into a place where there's less privacy. There's more surveillance. There's more public information.
No, I'll get this one. I'll flip this on its head. I would say until 200 years ago, there was no privacy. You lived in a small town with
everyone was in your business. Yeah.
Same set of neighbors. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew who you were courting. Everybody knew everything. And then
what I'm saying though is that there was a discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots, and
yes, that's more of a secrecy. Right?
Privacy was a luxury afforded to the wealthy, and in the future, privacy will be something people pay for, to have a conversation that's not recorded, to have an alibi, walk around with your phone,
maybe
to
that's
do the GPS tracking for you, so you have an alibi for having that extramarital affair, right?
Or maybe there'll just be no privacy.
It'll be like Star Trek. No one has any secrets. It's a utopia.
Maybe it goes back to the 16th century or 17th century when there was no real privacy. Right.
Interesting. If it's a human need, right, to have secrets or not.
It did not exist. It did not exist. I don't think in scale. Privacy did not exist in scale till the 19th century. People have been around a lot longer than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
Well, that's a good thought. But I'm going to wrap this up and thank you both for joining the Maiden Voyage, Herbie Hancock's amazing album.
I like your painting. Did you do that yourself?
That's a generated AI.
I thought so.
You can see that this particular lamp is attached to a tree, right? AI is really good at knowing what should be in a photo, but it has no idea what its meaning is or purpose.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
And then this dude over here has been standing here a while because he's got a snow pile around him. Right?
Yeah,
I saw him. I didn't see him in the snow.
And then over here, this street light is actually abutting up against the house instead of actually on the street like this one. And so,
it'll get
anyway,
smarter.
It's fun to make these images. Thank you both. Like I said, this will be an ongoing thing for the next couple of weeks, and then I'll probably change the time and date and keep doing it. The goal is just to provide a space, for conversation and potentially, prospective customers to the security agency to come in and say, you know what, I actually think you might be able to help me solve this actual problem. Let's talk about, writing up an SOW and an engagement. But for now, at least, it's just pure joy and fun to muse about what's on your mind and let's chat about it. So,
is this you, Bob Henderson mentor? Is this you, Bob Henderson mentor?
That's me. That's me. Yeah. Next time I wanted to bring up what happened with Lyft today and their alleged earnings, non-earnings, margins, and what happened. You've never seen a company do that, and it'll be interesting to see the fallout from that. What happened?
I'll have to read up on it.
Well, their stock's up 30% today. 30%.
Yeah, because they reported the wrong basis margin points that went up. It wasn't 5%. They reported 500 basis points. Whoa. And they had to backtrack that. Well, how does that
5 to 500 sounds like a fat finger to me. That sounds that's 5 to 7. 5 to 7 is a better lie. 5 to
Yeah.
5.
No, it's
So-
an Excel spreadsheet that got changed from a number to a percent, and it went from
Yes.
5 to 500.
Yeah,
Yes.
their
Yeah.
stock went.
Or after 10,000 years, you still can't get a 0 and a zip code on a spreadsheet, right? It's been
Yeah.
you can, but it's not easy. You would think that'd be easy, but
You
yeah,
have to use you have to use a Cyrillic 0.
you got to use it.
Yeah, But my mind said how I think like, wait a minute.
No, that's a good data integrity question that we can talk about
Yeah.
next week.
Yeah,
So
data-
feel free to dial in if you've got the time, and hopefully
Take
we'll
care.
have a few more
Be well,
friends and people. See you.
Great, thanks. Take care.